Agradecerles por estar aquí. Este tipo de seminario lo hacemos cada vez que empieza un año fiscal. ¿Por qué? Porque es supremamente importante conocer todas las nuevas reglas, todos los updates que vienen por el área migratoria. No queremos compartir información que no es real, siempre traemos a abogados especialistas en la materia y por eso hoy tenemos de invitados a Jibril y a Shadini. Ellos son abogados y saben todo lo relacionado a migración. Así que lo que hoy ellos van a hacer es toda la actualización, qué reglas empiezan a aplicar para aquellos que de pronto les afecta, que les puede cambiar en toda la situación.
All right, beautiful. Well, first of all, thanks so much to Jessica for inviting us, from Dobson Mitchell Allport to essentially give you guys a brief rundown, okay, on the 190 and the 491 visa. Okay, this is a very technical visa. There are a lot of requirements, which unfortunately we can't pack it all into 30 minutes. But so we'll try our best, and then we'll have some time at the end for questions. Okay, and if we can't get to you, if the question is too technical, we'll definitely be able to arrange for something to maybe send you an email to address any specific, questions that you guys might have. Okay, so I think Jessica's already introduced us. My name is Jibril, and I'm here with my colleague Shadini. We've done 190 and 491 visas for a number of years now, so you'll be the best people for you guys to come and ask your questions for. Okay. All right, so for today's talk, well, first of all, disclaimer, of course, whatever we talk about today is just general, that things might change at the time they watch the video. Okay, so yeah, well, for the topic today, we'll be breaking it down into a number of parts. First of all, we'll talk about the process of lodging the visa in general, and then we'll talk a bit about the skills assessment, about the point system itself for the 190 and the 491 visa, and then we'll talk about the state nomination program and its requirements and the priority attributes and all of those stuff. Okay, so I'm going to pass it over to Shadini. So now start on that.
Yes, so in terms of general skill migration, when we talk about general skill migration visas, the three main visas that you usually refer to are the 189, the 190, and the 491. The 189 and the 189 and the 190 are both permanent residency visas, and the 491 is what we call a provisional permanent residency pathway visa, where you live and work regionally for 3 years after you get the visa, and you can apply for a permanent residency visa. The 189 is a federal level visa, whereas the 190 and 491 are both state-sponsored visas. In terms of the process, so for all three of these visas actually, you need to have 65 minimum points, you need to have a skills assessment, and you need to have completed a relevant English test as well. So in terms of the process of applying for the 190 and the 491 in Tasmania, so you need to have a nominated occupation that's on the relevant list, and then you need to have a skills assessment related to that nominated occupation. And once you have the skills assessment, and as well as once you complete your English, then you can lodge what you call an expression of interest, and that's done through Skill Select. So that's essentially to let the federal government know that you're applying for this visa, and it will give you a rough breakdown of your points as well. And soon after you lodge your expression of interest, you can lodge your registration of interest with Migration Tasmania. So they have a ranking system in terms of priority attributes, and based on that, they will invite you to lodge your state nomination. And then you can lodge your state nomination application, and after you lodge your state nomination application, they will let you know whether your state nomination is supported, and when it is supported is when you can lodge the visa application. So that's the process for both the 190 and the 491 in Tasmania. And just with the 189, in terms of the 189, the difference is they don't have the state part of it. So once you lodge the EOI, based on that, you will get an invitation to lodge your visa application. But with the 189, you need really high points. So it's quite hard to get invited for the 189 essentially. And Jibril will touch on the points.
Okay, so I'm talking about the points. Again, so both of these visas, the 189 and then the 190 and the 491, have the points system that they implement. With the 189, the more points you get, the better off your visa application will be. So you can see why it's harder. So that's why some people tend to go for the 190 or the 491, which is a state-nominated visa. For this state-nominated visa, you only need to get 65 points. A lot of people think, oh, for the 190 and the 491, I need to get as many points as possible. No, You just need to get 65 points and you're eligible. Okay, but for the 189, you need to get as many points as possible to beat the others and their points. Okay, now these are all the criteria that the visa, the Department of Home Affairs will look at. Typically, with the point system, you don't need to hit every single one because again, you just need 65. Typically, if your age is within certain ranges, if you're, for example, 25 to 33, you get 30 points, so that's the most points that you can get. Typically, if you can hit your age, your English, your educational qualifications, studying in Australia, and if you're in Tasmania, luckily you get another 5 points there, and your partner points as well. Typically, with just these things, you'll have more than enough to hit 65 points. You don't even need to prove your work experience in the past, okay? But if you fall short, also, if you get invited for the 190, you get another 5 additional points. 491, you get another additional 15 points. So really, you don't need to prove your work experience unless you really fall short. But I'll just give you a bit of tidbit, a bit of secret. We try not to hit that because it's really hard to prove and provide the department with your pay slips and your contract for all your past work experiences. So as long as you hit 65, you're more than good to lodge the either the 190 or the 491. Okay.
Skills assessment. So in terms of the skills assessment, so once you find out what your nominated occupation is, you need to see what the assessing authority is to get your skills assessment. And based on your assessing authority, there are different requirements for different skills assessments. So you would need to check the assessing authority's website carefully to see what the requirements are for the skills assessment. So you might need things like English, work experience, specific qualifications. Another thing to bear in mind is how long the skills assessment might take as well. So if you have a visa expiry or something like that, you might want to consider whether you want to pay for priority processing or something like that to get it done a bit faster. Also to see how much the skills assessment would cost. And then look into what documents you would need to get a successful skills assessment. Another thing to bear in mind is that most skills assessments only last for 3 years. And yeah, occupation lists can change during that duration as well. So that's another thing to bear in mind in terms of skills assessments. Some of the common mistakes that people make when applying for skills assessments is thinking that you need to assess what you're studying now to get your skills assessment. So for example, if you have previous work experience back at home, you might want to see if there is a possibility of potentially getting a skills assessment related to previous work experience that you have done, any previous qualifications you have done without waiting until you actually complete your current qualification. Another mistake that people often make is limiting yourself to your title. So in terms of skills assessments, most skills assessments give you a skills assessment based on the tasks that you perform, not necessarily just the title. So that's what they're going to compare with the ANSCO tasks. So look at the tasks that you're seeing, and then you can see there might be nominations that you didn't even think you might be able to get a skills assessment for. So you need to check the tasks to see if you might be able to do that. So those are also some things to keep in mind when you're applying for a skills assessment.
And just to add to that, sometimes some jobs will give you a position that, the name of the position is this, but actually the tasks that you've done is actually for this occupation that you can hit for that skills assessment. So that's something that you should be aware of. Okay, so I guess I'll talk about the Tasmanian state nomination program. Okay, as maybe some of you may know, they have just released this year's state nomination program, the 2025-2026 year. A lot of changes, not something that we expected. We were hoping that it's going to be not that huge of a difference, but the two main differences that they have done for this year is by implementing the point system for the priority attributes. I'll talk about that after this, the different colors and different points. And there's also new income requirements. Again, unfortunately, they've increased it, which is a bit controversial, but it is what it is, and we have to make do with what we get. Okay. All right, so as you can see, it's this year's state nomination program. Well, for the 491, there's some concession there, but essentially you should, for your employment that you have at the moment, you need to make sure that it's at least $57,000 a year or a base rate of $28.85 per hour. Okay, all right, so, right here the priority attribute system. The colors are still the same, gold, green, and orange plus, and orange. But as you can see, if you hit the gold priority, you get 1,000 points. You'll instantly get your invitation for state nomination. Okay, but for this gold priority attribute, you need to be working in a very specific area, which is occupations in health, allied health, and teaching. So this is something that they've already sort of discussed with the stakeholders in the state to see what are the occupations that they really need and that they're really prioritizing. So if you're in those industries, then you'll essentially get your state nomination instantly and you can proceed with lodging your visa. But if not, then you can still consider the green priority attributes. We'll go deeper into that because you have to look at each and every pathway. They'll have different priority attributes. But essentially, if you hit the green priority, then you'll get, well, Migration Tasmania said that they'll get back to you within 6 months. So we can't promise anything. That's all in the hands of Migration Tasmania, but that's what they said. So if you get green, you'll hear back from them within 6 months. Orange plus, a bit later, maybe. Okay, and then orange, even later. So if you want to imagine it almost like a long queue of people, okay, I'm sitting at a reception table. Those who have the green priority attributes will be front of the line, and then the green, and then the orange plus, and then the orange.
Just in terms of that, so for the last program year, the pattern was that to actually get invited, you needed to have at least one orange plus priority attribute, and we anticipate that it's probably going to be the same going into this program year as well. So you should essentially try to hit at least an orange plus priority attribute so that you actually have a chance of getting invited to lodge the state nomination. In terms of the Tasmanian state nomination, there's 4 pathways for people in Tasmania. So there's the Tasmanian Skilled Employment Pathway, Tasmanian Skilled Graduate Pathway, the Tasmanian Established Resident Pathway, and the Tasmanian Business Operator Pathway. I'm assuming most of you would probably qualify for the Tasmanian Graduate Pathway, and some of you maybe might qualify for the Tasmanian Skilled Employment Pathway as well, or the Established Resident Pathway. So today we'll mainly focus on the Tasmanian Skilled Graduate Pathways and the Skilled Employment Pathways. In terms of the Tasmanian Skilled Graduate Pathway, so you can apply for the 190 and the 491 under this pathway. So the main difference here is in whether you apply for the 190 or the 491 is to apply for the 190, you need to have completed a course that's 2 years, and for the 491, it's a 1-year course. So, and for both of these, the course needs to have been done full-time in Tasmania to be eligible to apply under either of these pathways. And there's little things to keep in mind as well, like the type of the course, so it needs to be a diploma level or higher unless it's in the specific major groups. In terms of the priority attributes under the Skilled Graduate Pathway, the priority attributes are basically the same for both the 190 and the 491. So for the gold and the green priority attributes, the points are also the same for the 190 and the 491. And so you can see some of the priority attributes up there for the gold and the green. And then there's the orange plus. The orange plus priority attributes are also basically the same, but there is a little difference in the points in terms of the 190 and the 491. And for most of you, the orange plus priority attribute you can probably work towards trying to get is that you have been employed in Tasmania for at least the past 3 months, but less than 9 months in a role directly related to your skills assessment or eligible skilled graduate pathway study. So that means that if you work for 3 months related to your skills assessment or your study, Tasmanian study, then you will be able to claim that orange plus priority attribute. And the important thing for the Tasmanian graduate pathway is that during your course, when it's in session, you need to only have worked for 9 hours. And after the course is completed, then it's 20 hours a week. So you only need to find employment that's 9 hours a week while your course is in session.
Okay, I'll take over on the Tasmanian Skilled Employment Pathway. So for the graduate just now, that's for those who have studied at UTAS or anywhere in Tasmania. This pathway is for those who have worked here in Tasmania. Okay, there are 2 versions. There's the 190 and there's the 491. On the screen at the moment, these are the differences. After this, I'll show the similarities between these 2. But looking at the 190 skilled employment pathway, your employment in Tasmania needs to be closely related to your skills assessment. But for the 491, it does not need to be related to your skills assessment. So if you have any qualifications in the past, let's say from your home country, you studied for something else, and you managed to get a skills assessment for that, but right now the employment that you're doing here is different, you might be able to get the 491 skilled employment pathway. Okay, so that's one difference between these two. But if you want to get the 190, obviously people want to get their PR straight away, make sure that it's closely related to your skills assessment. If not, then go for the 491. The visa will last for, the expiry date is 5 years, but if you've stayed in the country for 3 years, then you'll be eligible to then lodge the 191, which is a PR pathway. Okay, so it's fine. The other difference is, okay, so the duration of your employment. Okay, for the 190, you must have been working in that employment for at least 9 months, according to the priority occupation list. Last year they were called TOESL, if you remember that. This year it's called the priority occupation. Okay, so make sure you open the website. We can even show you the website after this. There's a list of occupations. Make sure that your occupation is there. If you're in the teaching, occupation, health, allied health, remember that gold priority attribute that I mentioned. For those types of occupation, you just need to have been working for at least 6 months. So they really want, like doctors and nurses to be in Tasmania. Okay, for any other eligible occupation, you must have been working for at least 15 months. You need to show that you've been here for quite a while. For the 491, remember I talked about the salary that you were earning. For most of these, for the skilled graduate, for the employment pathway, you must have at least been earning $57,000 per year or $28.85 per hour. But for the 491, if your salary is less than that, but at least at the national minimum wage, you can still apply for the 491. Okay, but you need to have been working for at least 12 months. If your salary is more than that, at least 9 months, which is the same as this one. So they're trying to give you a chance and say, okay, you can lodge for the 491, but you need to show that you've been at least working for 12 months. Okay, so some of these similarities will be things like your employment hours in the week needs to be at least 20 hours a week. Okay, it can be part-time as long as it's 20 hours. It can be casual. Just needs to make sure that this amount is there. Amount of duration. So always keep your pay slips. That's something that the Migration Tasmania will need that. The Department of Home Affairs will also require that. So if you're going to lodge and claim for work experience, just make sure to keep your pay slips in a nice little folder in your computer. Put dates so that later on, next year, whenever you're ready to lodge, everything is neat and tidy by then. It'll be easy to prove your work experience. Next, you must be living in Tasmania, of course, and your dependents must not be in another Australian state, of course. You can be anywhere, but just in Tasmania, your dependents, okay? And the employment that you have at that moment, it needs to be at least 12 months, and when you lodge the application, when you click the lodge button, there needs to at least be another 3 months remaining in that employment, okay? After getting your nomination, there are some requirements that you need to meet, which is that you must not have left Tasmania for 2 years, and now the new one is that you need to stay in the same industry for at least 2 years, because they believe that once people have gotten their nomination, they change their jobs and they do something else, okay? So that's why.
Important considerations to remember is the genuineness of information provided. So when you're providing information to Migration Tasmania, as well as obviously the visa application, just make sure that you don't provide any false information or in terms of any priority attributes you're claiming, things like that. Make sure you can back it up with evidence, because Migration Tasmania can follow up on these and check on those things. So even after you get a nomination, while the visa is being processed, if Migration Tasmania finds out information that you have provided false information during the nomination process, they can withdraw your nomination, which will in turn get your visa refused. So make sure that you do provide genuine information. Another thing to remember is that your employment that you're claiming these priority attributes for needs to be at a well-established business. So the broad general description of that is that it needs to have been established for at least 12 months. And if it's a franchise, then each of those locations need to be operating for 12 months as well. But for certain occupations, there are caveats, so make sure to just check that with the Migration Tasmania website as well to see that how long the business needs to have been established for. And like we mentioned earlier, so the employment needs to be an average of 20 hours, except for the Tasmanian graduate pathway, which is 9 hours during study, and after the completion, it needs to be an average of 20 hours a week. And the Tasmanian study for the Tasmanian graduate pathway needs to be full-time and on-site in Tasmania. We will just briefly touch on the visa application as well. So in terms of applying for the visa application, once you receive your state nomination, so when Migration Tasmania emails you saying that your nomination is supported, you have 60 days from receiving that to actually apply for the visa application. So the cost is around $4,910 for the primary applicant, and if there's secondary applicants, depending on if they're adults or children, there's additional cost as well. In terms of the processing times, currently, according to the Department of Home Affairs website, these are the processing times. So within 19 to 26 months for the 190 and 21 to 26 months for the 491. But the time frames are very unpredictable at the moment, so they can fluctuate a bit as well. So just bear that in mind. Some of the other things to bear in mind in terms of this whole process is the points claimed. So as Jibril pointed out in the beginning, in Tasmania, Migration Tasmania only cares that you have 65 points when you're applying for nomination, for registration of interest, the whole process. So if you do hit the 65 points, you don't actually need to claim any points above that. That essentially just means that it makes it harder for you at the visa application stage because you have to provide all these additional evidence to show that you can match up your points. So if you have the 65 points, just go ahead with that. Don't bother claiming points above that.
Because if you were to say you're claiming 80 points, you need to make sure when the time comes to lodge the visa that you can actually prove and hit that 80 points. It needs to be equal or more. It can't be lesser than what you've claimed for. So if you get 65 and then later on you have more work experience, you don't need to use that. You can just keep that for yourself, but at least you know that you can hit that 65.
Then the other thing to bear in mind is the expiry dates of things. So keep in mind the expiry dates of skills assessments, any professional year qualification, any English test, things like that. So at the point of nomination, these all need to be valid. So make sure that if you have any of these things and they're coming up on the expiry dates, to make sure that you get them renewed. Other things to be mindful of is that you have to satisfy the relevant public interest criteria for the visas as well. That's including the health requirements. So that might be worthwhile just keeping that in mind. And as well as the one fails, all fail criteria. So that essentially means that the primary applicant can't satisfy the primary criteria unless all the members of the family unit meet the relevant public interest criteria as well. So if one of them failed it, then the primary applicant can't be granted the visa as well. So make sure that you are aware of all those little things as well when you are doing your visa applications.